Thanksgiving is just around the corner. Actually, Kevin is making Thanksgiving dishes in the kitchen this morning. And we're hearing all about where it got started in Plymouth, Massachusetts. The president and CEO of Plymouth, Lea Filson, is joining us now. For a certain age group, you may remember Lea as Lea Sinclair. Lea and I worked together for a long time in the early 80s on a show called PM Magazine. It was a 6:30 half hour where we did all kinds of stories. We traveled all over the world together. It was kind of a cool one. Anyway, let's get back to the story at hand with the real facts behind the story of America's National Thanksgiving holiday, one of the most beloved festivals. Lea, good to see you. How are you doing?
Good to see you too, Eric. I think most of the people watching us probably weren't born when we were doing that show. What do you think?
Well, a lot of them in the studio weren't, so. Anyway, let's talk about why Plymouth is so important to this country's history.
Okay, I am now in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and I do tourism here, although I miss New Orleans desperately. But let me just say that here in Plymouth, this is where the Mayflower landed, and this is where there was a half-century of peace between the indigenous peoples and the Pilgrims. And this is also where the supposed first Thanksgiving, as we call it, happened. It wasn't the first Thanksgiving anywhere because harvest festivals had gone on for a long time. But the reason we call it the first Thanksgiving is because that is the year that the Pilgrims finally survived the winter, had a good crop, and were able to finally realize that they weren't all going to perish. So for them, it was their first Thanksgiving since arriving.
And you are a descendant of people who came over on the Mayflower. You were a past head of the Mayflower Society. So, I mean, this is kind of in your blood, in your DNA.
It truly is, and that would explain to you why I'm here, because I certainly know the history. I had 8 different people that were on the ship through different lines, and that's not unusual. Most people probably have a line if they're willing to do their genealogy, but at any rate, it's a story that I've known for many, many years, and a story that is really, really important to each and every one of us. I mean, the Pilgrims truly, when you think about it, are America's family, because it was the first time that full families arrived in what was the New World at that time in order to settle.
And the first Thanksgiving, the one we think about in Plymouth, Massachusetts, I mean, did they have turkey, pumpkin pie, cranberry in a can?
Well, they had turkey, but it was wild turkey. It was really stringy and gristly and nothing like what we sit down and eat today. They had fowl, they had deer, and a lot of people think that the Pilgrims invited the indigenous peoples to join them, but that's really not the case. There were 90 indigenous peoples and only 40 or 50 Pilgrims that were involved in the first Thanksgiving. It lasted for 3 days. They all played games and shot arms and did all sorts of things together in order to celebrate that harvest. In a way, they kind of helped each other survive.
So is this more of a Native American celebration than, the Pilgrim celebration?
Native Americans do not call Thanksgiving a celebration. They call it the day of mourning. And that's because of what happened after.
Yeah.
And as we all know, for years and years, there were a lot of atrocities committed toward Native Americans, and that's why they call Thanksgiving the day of mourning. But every year we have a big Thanksgiving parade the weekend before. And if you can't come this year, you got to come on another year because it's really, really awesome. It's always the Saturday before Thanksgiving at 10 a.m. But on Thanksgiving Day, there are pilgrims that march and walk down Leiden Street where they settled, and then there's a day of mourning march by the indigenous peoples here.
All right, a lot of history there. And Lea, the weather up there looks great. Good to see you. This is the first time we've been on TV together in, 30-something years?
At least. It is so great to see you, and happy holidays and happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
All right, unfortunately, neither one of us has changed since then. All right, Lea, thank you.
Oh, right. Bye-bye.
Let's get over to Peyton checking out the forecast.